Welcome back, everyone, to a new story. We really hope you enjoy it. Last night, I made over $100,000 by pretending to be my sister. That sentence sounds insane. Doesn't it, like the start of some cheap thriller? But it's my life now. It's the truth. I'm staring at on my bank statement, the numbers glowing an unnatural green in the dim light of my basement bedroom. $110,427. More money than I've ever seen. More than I thought I'd ever make. And all it cost me was myself. My name is Caleb. I'm 20 years old. And until yesterday, my greatest accomplishment was hitting a legendary rank in a game no one outside of a small online community has ever heard of. I live in my parents' house, in the finished basement that smells faintly of damp concrete and forgotten laundry. It's my kingdom, my dungeon. From down here, I can hear the world moving on without me. I can hear my dad's car leaving for work, my mom's cheerful humming in the kitchen, and, most of all, the light, confident footsteps of my sister, Amanda, on the floorboards above. Amanda is everything I'm not. She's 2 years older, a junior in college, and she glides through life with an ease that seems almost offensive. She's beautiful in that effortless, sun-kissed way long blonde hair, a smile that could disarm a bomb, and a social calendar that's always full when she's home. The house feels brighter, filled with the sound of her laughter and the endless ringing of her phone. My parents adore her. They see her success as their own. And me, I'm the shadow. Caleb, the quiet one. Caleb, who's still figuring things out. Caleb, the gamer. They don't say it, but I see it in their eyes, a mixture of love and gentle disappointment. I'm the project they haven't quite figured out how to fix. My escape, my ambition, was streaming. I set up a corner of the basement with green screens, a high-end microphone, and a webcam I saved up for months to buy. I called my channel Cal X, a name I thought sounded cool and mysterious. I even used voice modulation software to drop my pitch a little, hoping to sound more like those deep-voiced, charismatic streamers who pulled in thousands of viewers a night. The reality was pathetic most nights. My viewer count hovered between 1 and 3. One was the analytic bot, one was me, on my phone, checking the stream quality. The third, on a good night, was a random person who'd click in, type LOL, and leave 30 seconds later. I'd play for hours, talking into the void, trying to force enthusiasm into my voice as I narrated my gameplay. But the silence of the chat box was deafening. I was just as invisible online as I was in my own house. The envy started as a low hum in the back of my mind, but lately, it had grown into a bitter, roaring fire. I'd watch Amanda get ready to go out with her friends, a whirlwind of perfume and silk, and feel this ugly knot tighten in my stomach. She didn't have to try. The world just seemed to bend to her will. The idea, the one that led to all this, started small and shamefully. It was a few weeks ago. Amanda had left her pink hoodie, a soft, oversized thing, on the back of a chair upstairs. I was heading down to my cave for another night of streaming to nobody when I saw it. On a whim I can't explain. I picked it up. It smelled like her, a faint scent of vanilla and floral shampoo. My heart started to pound. The house was empty. I took the hoodie downstairs and with trembling hands slipped it on. It was huge on my lanky frame, but it was incredibly soft. I looked at my reflection in the dark screen of my monitor, a pale, nervous boy swallowed by a field of pastel pink. Then I saw it, sitting on a shelf where Amanda had once left it after a Halloween party, a cheap synthetic wig, the same shade of honey blonde as her hair. I don't know what possessed me. It felt like I was watching someone else as my hands reached for it, my fingers clumsy as I settled the mesh cap over my short brown hair. The transformation was ridiculous, a parody. The wig was frizzy, the hoodie shapeless. But as I stared at the stranger in the reflection, something shifted inside me. The rhythm of my heart changed. It was a frantic, terrifying, and yet exhilarating beat. It was the thrill of touching something forbidden. For a split second, I wasn't the useless kid in the basement. I was someone else, someone interesting. I snatched the wig off and threw the hoodie on the floor, my face burning with shame. But the memory of that feeling lingered. The crazy thought bloomed from that seed of shame. I saw it all the time online. Gamer girls, cute streamers who'd get hundreds of dollars in donations just for smiling at the camera or making a heart shape with their hands. Their chats weren't silent voids. They were waterfalls of compliments and emojis. They didn't need to be the best players. They just needed to be girls. What if I could be one not for real? Just on screen. What if I could borrow Amanda's magic? Just for a few hours a night, people wouldn't be donating to Caleb. The loser. They'd be donating to her, or at least a version of her. A cute gamer girl who looked just like the most popular girl I knew. It was a sick, twisted idea born of jealousy and desperation, and it was the only idea I had. The idea festered in my mind for days. A dangerous fantasy I couldn't shake, but a wig and a hoodie weren't going to cut it. I needed more than a costume. I needed a miracle, and I knew exactly who to call for a miracle. Evan was a friend from high school, a genuine socially awkward genius who was now working as a lab assistant at a local biotech firm. We'd bonded over a shared love for theoretical science and weird what-if scenarios. While I was dreaming of game design, he was dreaming of cellular regeneration and genetic engineering, his company. He'd once told me over cheap pizza, was working on some next-gen cosmetic treatments. That was the corporate speak for it. Anyway, he described it as a prototype serum that could temporarily rewrite minor physical traits using a DNA sample as a template: smoother skin, fuller hair, that sort of thing. It was highly experimental and definitely not approved. My hands were sweating as I dialed his number. "Caleb, what's up, man? You never call," he said, his voice a familiar, friendly mumble. "Hey, Evan, got a weird question for you," I started, trying to sound casual. "You remember that cosmetic stuff you were telling me about, the DNA template thing?" There was a pause. "Yeah, the nanite-based restructuring serum. Why?" I took a deep breath. Could it do more than just skin and hair? Like, could it change? You know, bigger stuff. Body shape, voice. Evan was silent for a long moment. I could hear the faint clicking of his keyboard. Theoretically, yes, the nanites are designed to temporarily overwrite the user's cellular expression with data from the sample DNA. It's supposed to be limited to dermal and follicular structures, but the base formula, it's incredibly powerful. Unlocking its full potential would be reckless. Why are you asking, Caleb? This isn't for a sci-fi story, is it? My heart was hammering against my ribs. No, it's for a social experiment. I need it. Just a small vial, whatever you can spare. Caleb, this is crazy, he hissed, his voice dropping to a whisper. This stuff is undocumented. If my boss finds out, I'm fired. Or worse. What could you possibly need it for? I couldn't tell him the truth. I couldn't say, I want to turn into my sister so I can get donations on Twitch. So I lied. It's for a prank. A really, really elaborate one. It's temporary. Right, you said it was. The effect is keyed to a metabolic timer. It should last about 8 hours before the nanites deactivate and your body reverts to its baseline state. But Caleb, the dosage has to be precise, and you need a clean DNA sample from your target. I can get that, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Please, Evan, I'll pay you. He sighed, a long, weary sound. Forget the money. Just be careful. This isn't a toy. I'll leave a sample vial in the usual spot behind the library. Don't tell me anything else about it. I don't want to know. The next evening, I found a small, unmarked box tucked behind a loose brick. Inside, nestled in foam, was a glass vial filled with a shimmering, viscous pink liquid. It looked like something out of a video game, a health potion. Holding it, I felt a tremor of pure, unadulterated fear mixed with a potent shot of adrenaline. The next step was the hardest. I waited until Amanda was in the shower. I snuck into her room, my every footstep a thunderclap in my own ears. Her room was a different world from my basement, bright, clean, and smelling of vanilla. Her hairbrush was on her vanity, and tangled in the bristles were several long blonde strands. My fingers trembled as I carefully plucked one out. It felt like I was stealing a piece of her soul. It was long and silky, shimmering under the light, the perfect sample. Back in my basement, I performed the ritual. My hand shook so badly I could barely work the dropper. I placed Amanda's hair into the small receptacle on the side of the vial. The pink liquid swirled and pulsed with a soft, inner light as it absorbed the DNA. Then came the syringe. I'd never used one before. My skin crawled as I filled it with the glowing serum. I sat on the edge of my messy bed, the syringe in my hand, my own reflection staring back at me from the dark monitor, a pale, scared kid about to do something irreversibly stupid. It's temporary, I told myself. 8 hours, a social experiment. I closed my eyes, found a spot on my thigh, and pushed the plunger. The sensation wasn't pain. It was a warmth that spread through my veins like electricity, a tingling hum that started in my chest and radiated out to my fingertips. I gasped. Dropping the empty syringe, my whole body felt like it was vibrating at a high frequency. Then, the changes began. It was the strangest, most unsettling experience of my life. I felt my skin soften, the calluses on my palms smoothing out as if sanded down by an invisible force. There was a dull, shifting ache in my bones, a pulling sensation at my hips and a subtle tightening across my chest. My shoulders felt like they were narrowing, my limbs becoming more slender. I ran a hand through my short hair and felt it lengthening, spilling through my fingers like cool silk, cascading down my back. I brought a hand to my throat and felt my Adam's apple recede, shrinking away to nothing. I tried to speak, to say my own name, but what came out was a soft, melodic sound that was entirely alien. It was her voice. Stumbling to the small, cheap mirror I had tacked to the wall, I looked up, and I screamed. Or, I tried to. A startled, feminine gasp escaped my lips. Staring back at me was Amanda. Not a clumsy imitation. Not Caleb in a wig. It was her. The same heart-shaped face. The same wide blue eyes. The same delicate nose. Her body was slender and curved in ways I couldn't comprehend. I was wearing my baggy t-shirt and jeans, but they hung on this new frame in a completely different way, hinting at the feminine shape beneath. I raised a hand, and the reflection did the same. The hand was smaller, the fingers longer and more graceful. My mind was a riot of conflicting emotions, disbelief warred with a terrifying, exhilarating rush. It had worked. It had actually worked. For the next 8 hours, I was her. The first instinct was pure panic. The second was a burning, insatiable curiosity. What did it feel like to be her, to move in this body? The next phase of the plan began. I crept upstairs to her room again, this time. Opening her closet felt different. It wasn't an invasion. It felt like I was opening my own. My eyes scanned the rows of clothes, the soft sweaters, the stylish jeans, the colorful dresses. It was an arsenal I didn't know how to use. I started with the basics, my hands fumbling with unfamiliar clasps and fabrics. Her underwear drawer was a sea of lace and silk in soft pastels. Picking up a pair of panties, the material felt impossibly delicate. Putting them on was a surreal experience, the soft fabric clinging to my newly formed hips. Then a bra. I struggled with the clasp at the back for what felt like an eternity, my new slender fingers feeling clumsy and useless. When I finally managed it, the feeling was constricting, alien, a cage around my chest. I decided to start simple. I pulled out a short, black pleated skirt and a soft white V-neck t-shirt. The skirt swished around my thighs, a light, freeing sensation I'd never known. The t-shirt was snug, outlining the gentle swell of my new chest. It was both mortifying and fascinating. Finally, the stockings. I found a pair of sheer black thigh highs, sitting on the edge of her bed. I carefully rolled them up my legs. The sensation of the slick nylon against my smooth skin sent an involuntary shiver through me. My legs looked long, slender, and impossibly feminine. I felt delicate, breakable. I looked in her full-length mirror. The girl staring back was a stranger, but she was also me. She looked nervous and unsure, but undeniably pretty. The sight sent a jolt of something I could only describe as validation through me. This was the magic. This was what it was like. With a deep, shaky breath, I went back down to my basement, teetering slightly in a pair of her heeled ankle boots I'd found. I sat down in my gaming chair, the skirt riding up my thighs. I adjusted the webcam, switched on the lights, and started the stream. I didn't use a voice modulator this time. I cleared my throat and spoke, my new voice soft and a little hesitant. Hey, everyone, my name is Amy. Let's play some games. I used a fake name, a thin veil of security. The chat, usually a desolate wasteland, exploded. Whoa, who is this? OMG, you're so cute. Is this Cal X's sister? Amy 3. The viewer count, which had never broken single digits, shot up 10, 50, 200, 500 within an hour. I had over 2,000 people watching me. Then the first donation came, $5, with a message. You have a beautiful smile, Amy. My cheeks flushed with a genuine, unbidden blush. I murmured a thank you, my voice shaky. The blush only made the chat go wilder, and the donations started pouring in. $10, $20, $50, $100. Someone donated $1,000 with the message. Buy yourself something pretty. I was no longer Caleb, the failure. I was Amy, the cute gamer girl. I played terribly, my hands unsteady, my mind reeling. But no one cared. They were there for me, for my shy smiles, for the way I tucked a stray strand of blonde hair behind my ear, for the soft giggles that escaped my lips when I was startled. I was performing, and they were eating it up. By the end of the night, my PayPal account was overflowing. The final tally was staggering $427. I ended the stream in a daze, my head swimming. I had done it. As the adrenaline faded, a deep exhaustion set in. I leaned back in my chair, the unfamiliar weight of my long hair heavy on my shoulders. It was almost dawn. 8 hours had passed. I waited, expecting the tingling sensation, the return to my old self. I waited for the familiar, lanky frame of Caleb to reemerge. And I waited. And nothing happened. The first wave of panic was cold and sharp. I sat there in my gaming chair, frozen, as the sun began to cast weak morning light through the small basement window. I kept checking the clock, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. 8 hours. Evan had said 8 hours. It had been nearly 9. I pinched my arm, the skin soft and sensitive. I ran my hands down my sides, feeling the unfamiliar curves of my waist and hips. I tugged at the long, blonde hair. It was all still there. I was still her. Maybe the dosage was slightly off. Maybe it would take 10 hours, or 12. A dozen rationalizations fought against the rising tide of terror in my chest. I clung to them like a drowning man to a raft. It had to be temporary. It had to be. I couldn't stay in the basement. My parents would be up soon. The real Amanda would be waking up. The thought of them finding me like this sent a fresh spike of adrenaline through me. I scrambled out of the chair, my movements clumsy in the heeled boots. I had to get out of these clothes, wash the minimal makeup I'd applied off my face, and hide. Back in Amanda's room, my hands shook as I stripped off the skirt and top. I felt like a thief, an imposter. I pulled on one of my old baggy sweatshirts and a pair of sweatpants. They fit me like a tent now, completely hiding the feminine form beneath, but they felt like a tiny piece of my old self, a flimsy suit of armor. I scrubbed my face raw until every trace of mascara was gone. Then I hid in my room, pulling my new, long hair into a messy bun and tucking it under a beanie. I spent the day in a state of suspended dread, feigning sickness, jumping every time I heard footsteps near my door. By evening, nothing had changed. The panic had subsided into a dull, throbbing anxiety. The body I was in still wasn't mine, but the terror was giving way to a strange, terrifying new thought. The money, the $110,000 sitting in my account. It was a siren song, a justification for the madness. I told myself if I was stuck like this for a little longer, I might as well make the most of it. The temptation was too strong to resist. I rationalized that one more stream couldn't hurt. Maybe the second dose would somehow reset the first one. It was stupid, desperate logic, but it was all I had. So I did it again. I locked my door, my heart a nervous drum. This time, there was no need for the serum. I was already her. The process of getting ready felt less like a horrifying transformation and more like preparation. My hands were steadier this time as I sifted through Amanda's closet. My eyes fell upon a costume box tucked under her bed. I knew what it was. She'd worn it for a convention last year. A maid outfit. My face burned at the thought, but the streamer part of my brain, the part that had been starved for attention for so long, knew it would be a goldmine. The chat would lose their minds. With a sense of grim determination, I pulled it out, The costume was more intricate than I'd realized. First, a crisp white blouse with puffy sleeves and a black ribbon to be tied at the collar. My fingers, still feeling a bit alien, fumbled with the tiny buttons, but I managed. The fabric was soft against my skin. Next came the black dress, a simple A-line cut that flared out from the waist. It zipped up the back, and I had to contort myself to pull the zipper up, the motion feeling strangely practiced, almost instinctual. Then came the apron. It was white and frilly, tying in a large bow at the back. As I cinched it around my waist, it emphasized the narrowness of my new torso and the flare of my hips. I looked in the mirror. The effect was startling. I looked cute, ridiculously, shamefully cute. The final touches were a pair of white, lacy thigh-high stockings and a matching garter belt. The process of attaching the clips was maddeningly complex. But when I was done, the sight in the mirror made my breath catch. The costume hugged my body in a way that was both innocent and suggestive. I felt a hot blush creep up my neck. My skin tingled, a mixture of goosebumps from the cool air and a strange, nervous heat. I added the final piece of frilly headband. The girl in the mirror looked like an anime character come to life. I sat down for the stream, my hands clasped nervously in my lap. When I went live as Amy, the chat's reaction was instantaneous and overwhelming. It was a digital tidal wave of emojis, hearts, and all-caps declarations of love. Made Amy, I'm dead. My wallet is ready. Marry me. The donations were even more insane than the first night. They weren't just giving money, they were competing for my attention. They'd donate with questions, with compliments, with flirty messages. Amy, if I donate $500, will you do a twirl for us? My whole body recoiled in shame, but then I looked at the number on the screen. $500 for a twirl. I stood up, my cheeks on fire, and did a clumsy little spin, the skirt flaring out around me. The chat erupted. The donation was instantly matched by 10 others. I was playing a character. Amy was shy, sweet, and easily flustered when a viewer donated $1,000 with the message, "Bong, you are genuinely the most beautiful girl I have ever seen." I felt a real blush color my cheeks. I stammered a thank you, covering my face with my hands, and the donation spiked again. They loved the performance. They loved making me blush. A strange thing was happening. Part of me, the old Caleb, was screaming in humiliation. He was horrified, disgusted. But another part of me, a new, emerging part that felt suspiciously like Amy, was enjoying it. I liked the compliments. I liked being called beautiful. It was a form of validation I had never known, a potent drug that went straight to my head. For the first time in my life, I felt seen. I felt wanted. The stream lasted for 5 hours. By the end, I had made almost $200,000 more. I felt drunk on the success, my mind buzzing. I ended the stream and sat in the silence, the maid costume feeling like a second skin. This time, there was no anxious waiting. There was no desperate hope for the change to reverse. Deep down, a cold, hard knot of certainty had formed in my stomach. When I looked in the mirror, I wasn't just looking at a temporary disguise. I was looking at my new reality. The hours ticked by. 8, 12, 24, nothing. I was still Amanda, or Amy. I was still this girl. The panic came back, but this time it was different. It wasn't the sharp, immediate fear of being caught. It was a slow, crushing dread, the dread of permanence. This wasn't a costume I could take off. This was my body now, the soft skin, the slender hands, the gentle curves, they were mine. I had to talk to Evan. He was the only one who might have an answer. My mind raced. I couldn't just walk out of the house. I was a mirror image of Amanda. I needed a plan. I threw on the biggest, most concealing clothes I could find: a baggy hoodie, sweatpants, a baseball cap pulled low over my face. I looked like a girl trying to be inconspicuous, which was probably more conspicuous than anything else. My hands trembled as I grabbed my car keys. My old car keys. Driving felt different, my new, smaller frame didn't fit the driver's seat the same way. My feet barely reached the pedals properly. It was another jarring reminder of the completeness of the change. I drove through the night, my mind a maelstrom of fear and regret. The thrill of the donations felt like a distant, hollow memory. All I could think about was Evan's face, hoping, praying that he would look at me and say, "Don't worry, I know how to fix this." I was about to find out just how wrong I was. Evan's apartment was on the 3rd floor of a nondescript building across town. I pulled my hoodie down further, my heart pounding as I climbed the stairs. Every creak of the floorboard sounded like an alarm. I knocked on his door, my knuckles rapping a weak, hesitant rhythm. The door opened a crack, and Evan's tired, spectacled face peered out. "Hello? Evan, it's me," I whispered, my voice coming out soft and feminine, a sound that still sent a jolt of wrongness through me. He frowned, confused. "Do I know you?" I pulled back the hood, letting the long blonde hair tumble out. I looked up at him, my eyes pleading. "Evan, it's Caleb." His eyes widened in disbelief. He scanned my face, my body, his scientific mind trying to process the impossible data in front of him. He yanked me inside and slammed the door, his face pale with shock. "Caleb, what did you do?" he stammered, backing away from me. "The serum, it was supposed to wear off." "It didn't," I cried, my voice cracking. "It's been over a day. It's not going away. Evan, you have to fix this." The desperation I'd been suppressing finally broke through, and tears welled in my eyes. The sensation of crying in this body was different, too. The tears felt hotter, my sobs higher pitched. Evan stared at me, a dawning horror on his face. He ran a hand through his messy hair. Okay, calm down. Let me see the vial." I pulled the now empty vial from my pocket. He took it, his hands surprisingly steady, and carried it over to a desk cluttered with electronic parts and textbooks. He placed it under the lens of a digital microscope and typed furiously on his laptop. The silence in the room was thick with my ragged breathing and the clicking of keys. "Tell me exactly what you did," he said, not looking at me. I recounted the whole sordid tale stealing Amanda's hair, the injection, the first stream, the money. I left out the second stream in the maid outfit. The shame was too much to bear. He was quiet for a long time, his eyes fixed on the screen. Finally, he leaned back, looking utterly defeated. He took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "Oh, Caleb," he said, his voice heavy with a terrible finality. "What have you done?" "What is it?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Is there an antidote? Another dose?" He shook his head slowly. "No, it's not about dosage." He turned to face me, and the look in his eyes made my blood run cold. "The serum works by introducing nanites that carry the new genetic template. They're designed to be a temporary overlay, a biological skin. They rewrite your cellular expression for a set period. Then they deactivate and are flushed from your system. Your original DNA should remain untouched, the core blueprint." He paused, taking a deep breath. "But the sample you used, a sibling's DNA is too close to your own. Your genetic markers are incredibly similar. The nanites. They couldn't differentiate between the temporary template and your baseline code. Instead of creating an overlay, they identified Amanda's DNA as a correction to your own. They began a full system integration. They didn't just put a mask on you. Caleb, they rewrote the book." The words hung in the air, incomprehensible and devastating. What does that mean?" I whispered, though I already knew the answer. "It means the change isn't temporary, it's permanent. The nanites have already dissolved, their work complete. They've integrated Amanda's X chromosome and suppressed your Y chromosome across your entire cellular structure. Biologically speaking, he couldn't meet my eyes. Genetically, you are her now, a clone, essentially." The floor seemed to drop out from under me. I stumbled back, hitting the wall. "No," I choked out. "No, that's impossible. You can fix it. You have to." I was pleading, my voice rising with hysteria. "There's nothing to fix," he said, his own voice strained with a mix of pity and frustration. "Your body recognizes this as its natural state now. The only way to go back would be the same way anyone else would. Hormone therapy, years of it, surgeries. You'd have to medically transition to male. There's no magic serum that can undo this." The reality of his words crashed down on me with the force of a physical blow. Forever. This body, this face, this voice, it was mine forever. I slid down the wall, curling into a ball on the floor, my body racked with deep, gut-wrenching sobs. It was over. Caleb was gone. He had died in that basement, and this stranger, this terrified girl, was all that was left. Evan stood there awkwardly for a moment, then knelt down beside me, placing a hesitant hand on my shoulder. "I'm so sorry. Caleb, I never thought. I should have known better." I spent what felt like hours on his floor, a hollowed-out wreck. When the tears finally subsided, all that remained was a vast, empty despair. I couldn't go home. How could I? Amanda was there. I couldn't explain to my parents that their son had transformed into a carbon copy of their daughter. Using Evan's phone, I sent a text to my mom. "Hey, staying with a friend for a few days to work on a project. Don't worry. Love you." It was a pathetic lie, a tiny bandage on a mortal wound. Evan, bless his guilt-ridden heart, let me stay on his couch that night, but we both knew it wasn't a long-term solution. I had over $300,000 in a bank account under a name that no longer legally existed. I had the body and face of Amanda Miller and the driver's license of Caleb Miller. I was a ghost. The next night, under the cover of darkness, I drove back to my house, my home. It looked alien to me now, a place I no longer belonged. I used my old key, the metal cold and unfamiliar in my smaller hand, and snuck inside. The house was silent. I crept up the stairs, my every sense on high alert. My old room was just as I'd left it. It was a museum of a life that was no longer mine. The game posters, the messy desk, the smell of stale air and boyish sweat. It felt like a stranger's room. A wave of profound grief washed over me. I was mourning a person who was still technically alive. But I wasn't there for nostalgia. I was there to loot a life, my new life. I tiptoed into Amanda's room. The moonlight streamed through her window, illuminating the space where my future lay. I opened her closet, her drawers, and began to pack. It was the most surreal and heartbreaking act of my life. I was stealing clothes from my sister to build an identity for myself. My hands trembled as I folded her jeans, her sweaters, her t-shirts. My fingers brushed against the soft lace of her underwear, the silky fabric of her nightgowns. Each item was an intimate piece of her, and now, by necessity, it had to become a piece of me. I felt like a ghoul, a parasite. I took her favorite blue dress, the one she wore on special occasions. I took the simple sundresses she wore in the summer. I took hoodies and leggings for casual days. I packed shoes, sneakers, flats, a pair of sandals. I stood before her vanity, stacked with makeup I didn't know how to use. I swept it all into a bag foundation, mascara, lipstick, eyeshadow palettes in a rainbow of colors. I took her shampoo, her conditioner, her vanilla-scented body lotion. The last thing I grabbed was a framed photo from her nightstand. It was of the two of us as kids, maybe 8 and 10 years old, grinning gap-toothed at the camera on a family vacation. Caleb and Amanda, brother and sister. I stared at the happy, oblivious boy in the picture until my vision blurred with fresh tears. I stuffed it all into a large duffel bag. As I zipped it shut, my hand brushed against the soft fabric of a pink hoodie, the very one that had started this whole nightmare. I hesitated, then shoved it in. I took one last look around the room, around the house. Then I walked out the front door, leaving the key on the table. I closed the door on my family, on my home, on Caleb Miller, and I drove away into the night, a girl with no name, no past, and a bag full of stolen clothes. I drove for 6 hours, heading north with no destination in mind, just a desperate need to put distance between myself and my old life. The sun was rising when I finally pulled into a generic motel off a highway in another state. I paid for a week in cash, my voice still a little shaky as I signed the register with a fake name. The room was small and smelled of stale cigarette smoke and bleach. I dropped the duffel bag on the floor, the sound echoing in the silence. I was utterly alone. I looked at myself in the grimy bathroom mirror. The girl staring back was pale and tired, her eyes wide with fear and exhaustion. This was me now. This was my face. I had to get used to it. The first few days were a blur of disorientation and grief. I barely left the room. I'd try on the clothes I'd stolen, not for pleasure, but as a grim necessity. Each piece was a reminder of what I'd lost and what I'd become. Putting on a bra in the morning felt like a ritual of surrender. Zipping up a pair of Amanda's jeans felt like sealing myself into a coffin. I hated the softness of my body, the lightness of my steps, the high pitch of my own voice when I accidentally talked to myself. But survival is a powerful instinct. The money in my account was a lifeline, but I couldn't access it easily. The account was tied to Caleb Miller. I needed a new identity, a legal one, and for that, I needed to become real. My only connection to the world was my laptop, desperate for some semblance of normalcy and needing to figure out how to live. I started streaming again. It was the only thing I knew how to do. I set up a makeshift studio in the corner of the motel room, pinning a bedsheet to the wall as a backdrop. I went live as Amy. This time, it felt different. It wasn't a mischievous prank or a desperate cash grab. It was a job. It was my only path forward. I put on a simple sweater and a touch of makeup, my hands clumsy as I tried to replicate what I'd seen Amanda do 1,000 times. When I faced the camera, I wasn't just playing a role, I was trying to build a person. The viewers came flooding back, thrilled to see me again. They asked where I'd been. I created a vague story about moving to a new apartment and needing time to set up. They bought it instantly. The donations started again, a steady stream of validation. But this time, I focused. I played the games. I talked to the chat. I started to build a community. I found that being Amy allowed me a freedom Caleb never had. Caleb was shy, awkward, and invisible. Amy, on the other hand, was charming. She could be witty and playful. The anonymity of it, the fact that no one knew who I really was, became a shield. Behind the persona of Amy, I could be confident. I could flirt back with the chat, making them laugh. A strange thing began to happen. The line between Caleb and Amy started to blur. A week turned into a month. I found a small apartment in a quiet town where nobody knew me. I used a portion of the cash to pay the first 6 months' rent. The slow, arduous process of building a new life began. I spent hours online, researching how to get a new identity. It was a legal minefield, but with enough money and the right kind of shady help, it was possible. I found a service that could create a new birth certificate and social security number. I chose a new name, not Amy that was for the stream. I chose Jessica Parker, a name that felt plain, sturdy, and real. Living as a woman was a daily learning curve. I had to learn the simple things I'd never considered. How to walk in heels without looking like a baby deer. How to do my makeup so I didn't look like a clown. The bewildering, expensive world of skincare and hair products. I watched countless YouTube tutorials, mimicking the confident motions of the beauty gurus. The first time I went shopping for my own clothes was terrifying. I walked into a department store, my heart hammering. The women's section was an overwhelming landscape of colors, textures, and styles. A friendly sales associate asked if I needed help, and I almost ran out of the store, but I forced myself to stay. I bought a few simple things: jeans, t-shirts, a comfortable dress, paying for them at the counter. I felt like a spy in enemy territory. But when I got back to my apartment and tried them on, a flicker of something new sparked within me. These weren't Amanda's. They were mine, Jessica's. Slowly, reluctantly, I began to adapt. The initial horror of my new body began to fade, replaced by a grudging acceptance. I started to notice small things: the pleasure of a warm bath, my skin feeling soft and smelling of lavender, the way a pretty dress could actually lift my spirits, the simple, unexpected joy of braiding my long hair. I still had moments of profound dysphoria. Sometimes I'd catch my reflection unexpectedly and feel a jolt of panic. The face in the mirror a complete stranger. I missed the simple, uncomplicated feeling of my old body. I missed being Caleb, but Caleb was a memory, a ghost that haunted the corners of my new life. The stream became my sanctuary and my main source of income. My channel grew exponentially. I was no longer just a cute gamer girl. I became known for my sense of humor and my genuine interaction with my community. I was making more money than I'd ever dreamed of. I was successful. As Amy, I was everything Caleb had wanted to be. One night, a regular viewer, a wealthy tech investor who went by the username Mark C, had been donating generously all evening. In a private message, he wrote, "Amy, I know this is forward, but I'm going to be in your general area for a business trip next week. I'd love to take you out for dinner. No streaming, no personas, just to say thank you for creating such a great community." My first instinct was a resounding no. It was too risky. Amy wasn't real. But Jessica, she was sitting right here in her apartment, lonely and isolated. The thought of a real, adult conversation of connecting with someone outside of a chat window was both terrifying and deeply appealing. I found myself typing back, "I'd like that." The moment I hit send, my stomach twisted into a knot of panic and a strange fluttering excitement. I was going on a date as a girl, and a small, treacherous part of me was looking forward to it. The week leading up to the date with Mark was a masterclass in anxiety. 1,000 paranoid scenarios played out in my head. What if he recognized me from somewhere? What if I said or did something manly by accident? What if he thought I was a catfish, a girl who looked nothing like her online persona? That last one was darkly ironic. I looked exactly like my online persona. The problem was that neither of us was supposed to exist. This date felt like a final exam for my new life. Passing meant I could function in the real world as Jessica. Failing meant I was nothing more than Caleb in a very convincing costume, doomed to live my life behind a screen. The day of the date. I was a nervous wreck. I spent hours getting ready, a process that was still foreign and complicated. I stood in front of my closet, which was now filled with clothes that were mine. Not Amanda's. It was a small but significant victory. What does a girl wear on a first date? I had no idea. My sister had been the expert on these things. I felt a pang of loss for the advice I could never ask for. I finally settled on a simple, elegant choice, a dark red wrap dress that fell to just above my knees. The silk-like fabric felt cool and smooth against my skin. It was more sophisticated than anything Amy would wear on stream, and it felt right for Jessica. Then came the makeup. I sat at the small vanity I'd bought. My collection of cosmetics spread out before me like a surgeon's tools. I followed a natural date night tutorial on my phone, my hands surprisingly steady as I applied foundation, a touch of blush to bring color to my cheeks, and a soft smoky eyeshadow to make my blue eyes stand out. The final touch was a coat of mascara that made my lashes look long and dark. When I was done, I looked in the mirror and felt a genuine flutter of pride. The girl looking back at me was pretty, not just a copy of Amanda, but someone distinct. The makeup highlighted my features in a way that felt like my own. I looked like Jessica. The last hurdle was the shoes. I'd been practicing walking in a pair of modest black heels, and tonight was their public debut. Slipping them on, I felt a change in my posture. They forced me to stand up straighter, to move with more deliberation. I took a few tentative steps around my apartment. It was awkward, but manageable. When the doorbell rang, my heart leaped into my throat. I took one last deep breath, smoothed down my dress, and opened the door. Mark was older than I expected, maybe in his early 30s, with kind eyes and a warm, easy smile. He was dressed smartly in a blazer and dark jeans. He wasn't some creepy internet troll. He was a handsome, normal-looking guy. His smile widened when he saw me. "Amy, wow, you look even more beautiful in person." "It's Jessica, actually," I said, my voice smoother and more confident than I felt. "Amy's just for the stream." "Jessica," he repeated, the name sounding perfect on his lips. "It's a lovely name. I'm Mark. It's a real pleasure to finally meet you." The restaurant he'd chosen was quiet and intimate. For the first 20 minutes, I was painfully self-conscious. I was aware of everything: how I was sitting, how I held my fork, the way my dress felt against my legs. I was terrified of being discovered, of my true self leaking through the cracks of this carefully constructed facade. But Mark was incredibly easy to talk to. He asked about my life, and I gave him the rehearsed backstory I'd created for Jessica. Parker grew up in a small town, moved here for a fresh start, fell into streaming by accident. He talked about his work in software development, his passion for hiking, his terrible attempts at learning to cook. He was funny, intelligent, and treated me with a gentle respect that was completely disarming. Slowly, I began to relax. I found myself laughing, a genuine, unforced laugh. I was participating in the conversation, not just as a performer, but as a person. We talked for hours, long after our plates were cleared. There was a moment when he reached across the table and lightly touched my hand to emphasize a point. The brief contact sent a jolt of warmth through me, a simple human connection that I hadn't realized how much I missed. It wasn't scary or weird, it felt nice. He never once made me feel like Amy the streamer. He was talking to Jessica, and as the night went on, I felt less like Caleb playing a part and more like myself. Or rather, a new version of myself. When he walked me back to my apartment door, there was a slightly awkward pause. "I had a really wonderful time tonight, Jessica," he said, his gaze sincere. "Me too, Mark," I replied, and I meant it. "I know I'm leaving tomorrow, but my company has a new office here. I'll be back in town a lot over the next few months. I'd really like to see you again, if you're open to it." My heart did a little flip. He wanted to see me again. Me, Jessica. "I'd like that very much," I said, a real smile gracing my lips. He didn't try to kiss me. He just gave a small, warm smile, said goodnight, and walked away. I closed the door behind me and leaned against it, my legs feeling a bit like jelly. I had done it. I had survived a date. More than survived, I had enjoyed it. I walked over to the mirror and looked at my reflection, the red dress, the soft makeup, the slight flush on my cheeks. For the first time, I didn't see a ghost of my sister or a terrified boy in hiding. I saw a woman who had just been on a lovely date. I saw Jessica. The internal conflict hadn't vanished. The grief for Caleb was still there, a quiet ache in a corner of my heart, but it was no longer the all-consuming terror it had once been. It was being balanced by something new, the cautious optimism of a future I was building for myself. I had lost a son, a brother, and a boy who felt like a failure, but in his place, I was discovering a woman who was successful, confident, and, for the first time in a long time, maybe even a little bit happy. The transformation had been forced upon me, a cruel twist of fate, but the life I was building now. That was a choice, and for the first time, it felt like the right one. Months trickled by, turning the unfamiliar into routine. Waking up was no longer a shock. The reflection in the mirror was simply my own. My apartment began to feel like a home, filled not with the stolen artifacts of Amanda's life, but with the things I, Jessica, had chosen. A bookshelf filled with novels I'd wanted to read, a comfortable armchair, prints on the wall that I found beautiful. My life settled into a rhythm. By day, I was Jessica. I went to the grocery store, the coffee shop, the gym. I learned to navigate the world with a new kind of awareness. I learned about the subtle camaraderie between women in public spaces, a shared smile, a compliment on a dress from a stranger. I also learned about the less pleasant side, the unwanted stares, the casual condescension. It was a whole new social language, and I was slowly becoming fluent. By night, I was Amy. My stream was more successful than ever. I'd become a partner on the platform with a loyal and thriving community. I was a professional now. I had an accountant to manage the small fortune I was earning. I even hired a moderator to help manage the chat. Amy was a brand, a successful business venture born from Caleb's desperate, jealous fantasy. But she was also a part of me now. Her confidence, her playfulness, they had bled over into Jessica's personality. Mark and I kept in touch. We texted almost every day, and our video calls became a regular occurrence. He came to town once or twice a month, and our dates became the highlights of my new life. We went to museums, tried new restaurants, walked in the park. With him, I felt normal. I felt like Jessica Parker, a streamer who was dating a kind, intelligent software developer. The lie of my origin was always there, a carefully guarded secret in the back of my mind. But it grew quieter with each passing day. He was the first person I told. It was about 6 months after our first date. We were sitting on my couch, watching a movie, a comfortable silence between us. My head was resting on his shoulder. His arm was around me, and I was filled with a sense of peace I hadn't felt since before the transformation. But the peace was tainted by the secret. I couldn't build a real future with him on a foundation of such a monumental lie. I sat up, my heart starting to pound with the familiar rhythm of fear. "Mark, there's something I have to tell you." He turned to me, his expression open and concerned. "What is it? You can tell me anything." And so, I did. I told him everything. The whole insane, unbelievable story. I told him about Caleb, the lonely kid in the basement, about my sister, Amanda, about the envy, the desperation. I told him about Evan and the pink serum, my voice barely a whisper as I described the transformation. I told him how it had become permanent, how I'd run away and created Jessica from the ashes of my old life. I spoke for a long time, my eyes fixed on my hands, unable to look at his face. I braced myself for any reaction: disbelief, disgust, anger, laughter. When I finished, the silence was absolute. I finally dared to look up at him. He was just staring at me, his expression unreadable. I couldn't tell if he was processing the information or preparing to run for the door. "So you were a guy," he finally said, his voice quiet. I flinched but nodded. "Yes, my name was Caleb." He was silent for another long moment. Then, he reached out and took my hand. His touch was warm and steady. "Okay," he said softly. "Okay," I repeated, confused. "That's it. You don't think I'm a monster, a freak?" He shook his head, a small, sad smile on his face. "No, I think you've been through something unimaginable. The person I've gotten to know these last few months is Jessica. You are smart and funny and kind. You're the woman I'm falling for. Does it matter how you got here?" Tears welled in my eyes, but for the first time, they weren't tears of grief or fear. They were tears of overwhelming relief. He saw me. He saw all of it, the ugly, the broken, the impossible parts, and he didn't run away. "So the whole clone of your sister thing isn't a deal breaker?" I asked, a watery, weak attempt at a joke. He actually chuckled. "It's definitely the most unique origin story I've ever heard. But no, not a deal breaker." He squeezed my hand. "You're Jessica. That's who I know. That's who I care about." In that moment, something inside me finally settled. The ghost of Caleb, the one I'd been carrying, didn't vanish, but he finally seemed to be at peace. He was a part of my story, the prologue to the life I was living now. But he wasn't the whole book. A few weeks later, I was getting ready for my stream. The routine was second nature now. I sat at my vanity, the lights of my setup casting a warm glow. I applied my makeup with a practiced ease, blending and brushing until the face in the mirror was Amy, bright-eyed and ready for the camera. I put on a cute, comfortable sweater, a favorite of my audience. But as I looked in the mirror, I saw more than just Amy. I saw Jessica, the woman who had built this life, and deeper still, I saw the faintest echo of Caleb, the ambition and the desire to be seen that had started it all. They weren't separate people anymore. They had merged, integrated into a single complex person, me. I started my stream, and the familiar cascade of greetings filled the chat. The viewer count climbed into the thousands. The donation alerts began to chime. It was my job, my kingdom, the world I had built. I smiled at the camera, a genuine, unforced smile that reached my eyes. It wasn't Caleb's bitter smirk or Amy's shy, practiced grin. It was Jessica's smile, confident, content, and real. "Hey, everyone," I said, my voice clear and warm. "It's good to see you all tonight." I glanced at my second monitor, where a photo was pinned to the desktop background. It was the one I'd taken from Amanda's room, the two of us as kids, happy and unaware of the bizarre path our lives would take. I no longer looked at it with grief. I looked at it with a sense of bittersweet nostalgia for the boy I was, and a quiet gratitude for the woman I had become. I had lost myself in the most profound way imaginable, but in doing so, I had found a version of me that was stronger, more successful, and more alive than I ever could have been before. My name is Jessica, and this is just the beginning of my story.